Welcome to The Last Bet, the podcast where we have honest conversations about gambling addiction, recovery, and what it really takes to rebuild your life. I'm your host, Ryan Stewart. Whether you're struggling yourself, supporting someone you love, or just looking to better understand this addiction, you're in the right place. Here, you'll find real stories, practical tools, and hope from people who've been there. Because recovery isn't about your next bet, it's about making your last one. Welcome to The Last Bet. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Ryan Stewart. Just want to remind everybody to make sure you please rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast. You can find the podcast at our website. You can simply just share the website. It's safpodcast.com. That's safpodcast.com. You can find all of our podcasts there. You can also find the weekly gambling addiction community meeting that we have every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. And that runs till 8:30 p.m. Eastern as well. You can go there, click the link, get the Zoom link to join us for that every Wednesday. So if you've listened to the first 3 episodes, you already know that I'm not sitting here as somebody who has gambling figured out because I read about it in a book. I've lived it. I've chased losses. I've convinced myself the next bet was going to fix the last one. I've experienced what, gambling can do to your mind, your finances, relationships, and especially your peace. And sports betting deserves its own conversation because it can look incredibly normal. You're watching a football game with friends. Everybody's got a parlay. Somebody's talking about the spread. Odds are being discussed. Your phone is right there in front of you. And placing another bet can just take seconds. That's a completely different gambling environment than the one many of us grew up with. And the numbers show how massive this has become. According to the American Gaming Association, Americans legally wagered almost $167 billion on sports last year. That generated almost $17 billion in revenue. Think about that. $17 billion in sportsbook revenue. That money didn't just appear out of nowhere. It came from us. And I'm not saying that because sports books are secretly evil. I'm saying it because we need to remember what gambling actually is. The sports book is a business, and the business model works because collectively bettors lose, right? It all starts out looking harmless. For a lot of people, sports betting doesn't begin with disaster. It starts with, let's throw $20 on a game. Or, this parlay pays $800. Or I know football. I actually have an advantage here. And that last one can be dangerous because sports knowledge can give you confidence. I know it did for me. You know the teams, you know the injuries, you know the quarterbacks, you know who's playing on 3 days rest. You know the stats. So it doesn't necessarily feel like gambling. It can feel like you're making an educated investment, right? But knowing sports doesn't mean you can consistently predict uncertainty. And knowing more can sometimes make you, even more confident. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought that. I've got this one figured out. Then the game starts. Something completely unexpected happens. And now I'm chasing, right? This is where I think people should pay attention. Sports betting can slowly change why you're watching sports. I know it did for me. Maybe your favorite team wins, but you're pissed off because they didn't cover. Think about how crazy that is. The thing you supposedly wanted to happen, your team won, and you're pissed off. Why? Because you lost money, or your fantasy player has an unbelievable game, but he misses the one statistical mark you needed for that parlay. Now you're angry at him. Or there's 30 seconds left at a basketball game. The outcome's already decided. Nobody in the arena cares about another basket. But you do. Because you've got the over. or the under. Suddenly, a meaningless basket isn't meaningless. It determines your full mood, probably for that night, day, week. And that's what I think you have to ask yourself. Am I still watching sports because I love sports? Or am I watching because sports have become the delivery system for gambling? Those aren't the same thing, right? The cell phone has changed literally everything. Sports betting today isn't just, putting money on who wins a game. You can bet before the game, during the game now, which is insane, on individual players, individual stats, on what's going to happen next, a pitch. And you can do it literally just from your couch. I can do it sitting here. Isn't that insane? Literally sitting at the game and you can bet. Instant cash out features now. Right into the betting apps. Because we're used to be, natural stopping points, right? Now the opportunity to place another wager can follow you everywhere you go. Your sports book is literally in your pocket. For someone with a gambling problem, that's like carrying the casino around all day. You're not necessarily waiting until Saturday night. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to walk through a casino door. You can be sitting on your couch watching Monday Night Football, and within seconds, you've deposited money through an app and placed another bet, and another, and another. It just doesn't stop. Live betting. Live betting deserves a whole lot of attention because now you're losing original bet doesn't necessarily mean you're done. Maybe, you bet on a team before kickoff and they're getting destroyed. You could accept the loss, right? Or you go back in the app and they give you another opportunity, new odds, new spread, new prop bets, just a new bet altogether. And your brain's like, I can fix this. Again, talking about chasing. It just has a different interface, right? And if you've listened to my episode about chasing, you know exactly where that road can lead. You aren't, necessarily betting because you found a great opportunity, right? You're betting because you want relief from what just happened. You want your money back. You want to erase the mistake. And the fastest way your brain thinks it can erase that pain, right? By gambling is more gambling. That's the trap. Now let's talk about the parlay, right? We'll talk about something almost every sports bettor recognizes, the parlay. Because parlays are exciting. You put, a few things together and then suddenly relatively small bet can theoretically turn into like this huge ass payout. And then you're sitting there thinking, I only need 4 things to happen. Then 3 of them hit. It never fails. And you're waiting on that 4th. And you were so close, almost can be incredibly powerful psychologically, right? Because instead of thinking, I lost the bet, you think, I almost won. So you build another one. Maybe this time you add another leg. Maybe you increase the wager. Maybe you're trying to recreate that feeling, right? Research on gambling has long examined that the role of near-miss experiences and variable rewards in keeping people engaged. And sports betting gives you endless opportunities to convince yourself you're getting closer. But close does not pay. A losing ticket that misses one leg and a losing ticket that misses all 5 have the same fucking thing in common. They're losers. This is becoming the norm for younger people. There's another part of this conversation that completely bothers me. Young people are growing up in a sports culture where betting is increasingly familiar. NCAA commissioned a national survey of 3,500 people. Ages 18 to 22 found 58% have participated into betting on sports. Among students living on college campuses, it was 67%. And among those young adults living in-game betting was the most popular type. of people using betting apps over sportsbooks. This isn't some fringe activity anymore. For a lot of young sports fans, betting is simply part of the sports culture now. And that's why, conversations like this matter, not because everyone who bets is addicted, but because people need to know what the warning signs look like before they're already in trouble. When it really becomes a problem, so should you start paying attention? Forget about the dollar amount for a minute. Look at your behavior. Are you chasing losses? Are you betting more than you planned? Are you depositing money you said you wouldn't deposit? Are you hiding bets? Are you lying about how much you're losing? Are you borrowing money? Are you checking scores constantly? Does losing just completely ruin your mood? Do you feel anxious when you don't have action on a game? Do you find yourself betting on sports you don't even care about? Are you gambling while drinking and making bets you wouldn't normally make? The last one matters a lot too. In 2025, long study following young adult sports bettors found that periods more frequent alcohol use were associated with more betting, greater amounts wagered, more chasing of losses, and more negative betting consequences. That's something worth really thinking about because alcohol and sports are already culturally connected. Now add instant mobile gambling for somebody vulnerable to addiction. That's potentially a dangerous combination. But here's the biggest question I'd ask. Can you comfortably watch a game without betting on it? If your immediate reaction is, why would I want to? Pay attention to that. Really, pay attention to that. What does gambling actually cost? When we talk about gambling addiction, everybody immediately thinks about money. And obviously, money matters. Gambling can absolutely destroy someone financially. I know. But some of the biggest things I lost weren't printed on a bank statement. Time was a huge one. Attention, my peace, my presence. The ability to sit somewhere without, checking a score on my damn phone. The ability to enjoy something without needing action attached to it. That's the part people don't always see. You cannot be physically sitting with your family and mentally be, somewhere else completely. You're checking a score, refreshing an app, thinking about the next bet, calculating what happens if this leg hits, thinking about what you're going to, bet next if it doesn't. You're there, but you're not really there. Addiction has a way of, stealing your attention before it steals everything else. And then there's a mental health side to this. There's research behind this too. A study of young adults, sports bettors across 36 states found a greater problem. Sports betting severity was associated with high levels of depression, anxiety, psychological distress, loneliness, and poor measures of well-being. The strongest relationship they found was stress. That doesn't mean sports betting automatically causes all those problems. The correlation isn't causation, but it absolutely challenges the idea that problematic sports betting is harmless entertainment. And I know what gambling did to my stress because when you're constantly trying to win, recover losses, hide losses, calculate money, and figure out your next move, your mind never shuts off, ever. And let me tell you something, the industry isn't going anywhere. I also want to be realistic about something. Sports betting isn't disappearing. Legal sportsbook are a massive industry. And I don't think pretending gambling doesn't exist is the answer. Interestingly, industry data shows sports betting, television advertising has actually declined from 2021 peak, but the betting ecosystem itself is deeply established. Apps, odds, promotions is huge, sports media, social media, podcast, influencers, live betting. The ability to gamble isn't difficult to find. So recovery can't depend on a world removing every single trigger. Eventually, you have to learn what your triggers are and put those barriers between yourself and the bet. That might mean self-exclusion, deleting apps, blocking gambling transactions, giving someone else control of certain finances temporarily, not watching certain games for a while, leaving the, like betting group chats, changing who you follow online. I think that's a big one. Whatever you need to do, because protecting your recovery is most important than proving you can sit next to the thing that almost destroyed you. Sports can become sports again. Here's something I fully didn't understand until I stopped gambling. You can enjoy, sports again. Eventually enjoy them without needing, money on the outcome. At first, it may feel a little bit different, maybe even boring, because your brain became accustomed to another layer of excitement. But eventually, something changes. You start watching the game again, not your bet. You appreciate the competition, the athletes, the strategy. You enjoy your team. And when the game ends, it's over. You don't owe anybody money. You don't need to win anything back. You don't need another game to start. You don't have to stare at the ceiling thinking about the bet you almost hit. The game's over. And you move on with your life. There is a tremendous amount of freedom in that. Big time. The question I want you to answer. So if you're listening to this and you're currently sports betting, I'm not going to tell you that, placing a bet automatically means you have a gambling problem. That's not true. But I do want you to answer this question honestly. What would happen if you stopped betting on sports for 30 days? Would you miss it? Would you be uncomfortable? Would watching games suddenly feel pointless? Would you keep thinking about betting? Would you start looking at another way to gamble? Would you struggle to actually stop? Because sometimes the best way to understand your relationship with something is to remove it and see what happens. For me, recovery isn't about figuring out how to gamble normally. It's about realizing I don't need gambling anymore. I don't need the next bet. I don't need the parlay. I don't need the chase. I don't need money riding on a game to make my life exciting. Sports betting convinced me that having action made the game better. But eventually, the game wasn't enough. I needed the bet. And that's the difference I want people to understand. The sports book didn't make me love sports more. It made me love betting more than the sport. Today, I choose something different. I get to watch the game, enjoy the game. I get to turn it off and move on with my life. No chasing, no checking, no trying to win back yesterday, because sometimes the biggest win isn't hitting the bet. It's realizing you don't have to place it. Thank you so much for listening or watching the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. Again, go to safpodcast.com to catch up on previous episodes. Don't forget our Wednesday night meeting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time called Bet on Recovery. Please share the podcast. Please like, subscribe, review. And if you'd like to come on as a guest and talk about your struggles with gambling, your recovery, I would love to have you on. Please reach out to us through the website. Again, it's safpodcast.com. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to The Last Bet. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, like, subscribe, and review. Also, share it with someone who needs it. For more episodes and recovery resources, visit safpodcast.com. That is safpodcast.com. Until next time, remember, Your last bet could be the first day of your new life.